Click, clack, click. The sound came from my desk in obedient little steps, as steady as breathing. The typewriter sat where it always sat, angled toward the window so the morning light would land on the page and make the ribbon's faint gloss look like something alive. I'd owned the machine long enough to recognize its moods. The sticky E, the reluctant A, the way the carriage return needed a firmer pull when the air turned cold. My mornings had the same shape because I'd trained them that way. Wake. Put the kettle on. Wait for the first hiss. Spoon yogurt into the chipped bowl with the hairline crack that never grew, no matter how many times I washed it. Sprinkle granola until it sounded like dry rain. Sit. Write. Not because the writing was good, because it proved I could still put one thing after another and make it mean something. At 6:16, the coffee pot gave its familiar gurgle and the house sighed with heat that never quite reached my feet. The street outside was dim and empty, the way it always was at that hour. One porch light down the block, one street lamp with a tired yellow halo, frost along the gutters like a thin, patient hand. At 6:17 he appeared. He didn't step into view the way a man should, coming from somewhere and heading towards somewhere else. One moment there was only the pale stretch of sidewalk. The next, there he was, in the middle of it, as if the street had remembered him late. I'd seen him for 20 mornings. I'd told myself each time that my eyes were finding patterns in the dark, shadows and timing, the mind's old hunger to turn coincidence into story. I'd told myself it didn't matter, because he never did anything except walk. He came at the same minute, moved at the same pace, reached the end of the block, and nothing. Not a turn. Not a pause. Not even a shift of weight as he stepped off the curb. He didn't vanish in a flash. There was no theatrical tear in the air. He simply wasn't there anymore, the way a sentence disappears when you pull the paper too far and the margin swallows it. The first time it happened, I'd gone outside barefoot, forgetting the cold, forgetting the decency of slippers, forgetting that the body keeps score. I stood on the porch and stared down the street until my breath began to ache. In the old days, my dog would have barreled past me to investigate a leaf skittering over concrete, a squirrel tail, a stranger's scent. Now he slept through it, even when I called his name, even when I opened the door wide enough for the cold to spill in and change the smell of the room. I tried not to let that part matter. I had a talent, honed, practiced, for stepping around certain truths, the way you step around a board in the floor that squeaks and pretends it doesn't. I tried to be practical. On the 8th morning, I set my phone on the sill and recorded the street from 6:15 to 6:20. The video showed a quiet block and a dirty pane of glass. The timestamp blinked forward obediently. The street lamp buzzed. A car passed once, far away. At 6:17, nothing changed. On the 12th morning, I positioned the mirror from the hallway so the window would catch another angle. If it was a trick of reflection, if it was me. The mirror reflected my desk, my hands, the typewriter, the pale page. It reflected the bowl with the crack. It reflected the steam rising from my coffee in a thin and temporary column. At 6:17, it reflected nothing else. By the 20th morning, the sound of the typewriter had begun to feel like a dare. Click, clack, click. Keep going. Pretend your rituals are stronger than the world. And then came the 21st. I noticed it first because the air changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a howl. It was a subtle tightening, like the moment before you sneeze. An anticipatory pressure that makes you aware of your own face, your own skin. My fingers paused above the keys. The room smelled of ink and coffee and the clean, sharp bite of winter coming in under the sill. Outside, he appeared at 6:17 as always, hunched, shoulders held as if bracing against wind that wasn't there. He moved with a patient heaviness, like a man carrying groceries up too many stairs. I watched him walk toward the end of the block. He passed the neighbour's hydrangea bush, dead sticks wrapped in frost. He passed the storm drain where a single brown leaf had been stuck for weeks. He passed beneath the street lamp's yellow circle. And then he stopped. Not at the end of the block. Not at the curb where he always used to dissolve into nothing. He stopped in front of my house. I didn't mean to move. My chair scraped anyway. The sound felt enormous in the quiet, like a confession. The dog didn't lift his head. The typewriter waited, carriage poised, the last line half written. I stood and went to the window. The latch was cold enough to bite. When I flipped it open, the metal clicked with a finality that made my stomach drop. The window slid up. The cold arrived immediately, clean and punishing. It threaded under my shirt, tightened along my arms, took the warmth from my wrists, the way water takes ink from paper if you let it. The stranger looked up. For the first time in 21 mornings, his face was close enough for me to see details that weren't just man, coat, shadow. He had the kind of tired that sat in the bones, not the eyes. Tired that didn't get better with sleep, because sleep wasn't what caused it. His cheeks were rough with stubble. A faint scar cut down into one eyebrow. He didn't look angry. He looked like someone who had rehearsed an apology until the words went dull. His gaze fixed on me as if he'd been waiting for my attention all along, as if the previous mornings had been him knocking politely and leaving when no one answered. My throat tightened. The cold didn't help. Neither did the sudden awareness of how thin the glass had always been between my life and whatever this was. He opened his mouth, and even before he spoke, I knew he wasn't here to threaten me. He was here to tell me something he wished he didn't have to know. "This is the last version where you're still alive," he said. His voice didn't carry down the street the way shouting carries. It stayed close, contained, as if the air itself didn't want to spread it around. Almost gentle, almost exhausted. I waited for my mind to do what it always did. Make a story, find the trick, turn the world into something I could type up and set at a safe distance. Instead, my hands began to shake. It wasn't fear the way fear is in movies, sharp and clean. It was the slow, creeping dread of being seen too accurately. The kind of dread that comes when someone says out loud the thing you've been stepping around for so long that you've forgotten where you put it. Alive. The word landed in me like a weight. Behind me, the typewriter sat with its blank page fed and ready. On the top line, half a sentence waited with the last letter struck too lightly. I had meant to write about the mornings. I had meant to make them smaller by naming them. That's what writers do when they can't fix something. They describe it until it behaves. The stranger's eyes didn't flick away. He looked at me as if he could hear the quiet panic in my ribs. As if he knew how many versions it takes to learn that information isn't the same thing as understanding. My dog breathed once, deep, even, and did not wake. The street lamp buzzed. The leaf at the storm drain did not move. I had a question, several, crowding behind my teeth. Why you? Why 6:17? Last version of what? But the most immediate question wasn't any of those. It was simpler, and it terrified me more than the premise itself. If I ask him why, do I lose the one morning I can still pretend I'm the person who gets up, makes coffee, and writes? The cold kept crawling up my arms. My fingers gripped the sill so hard my knuckles paled. The stranger waited, patient in a way that felt practiced, like he'd stood here before and watched me make this choice a dozen times, like he already knew what I tended to do when the truth came too close. My mouth opened. No sound came out at first. In the silence, the typewriter's unfinished line seemed to stare at me from across the room, an accusation and a lifeline. I forced air into my lungs. The breath fogged in front of my face, briefly solid, briefly visible, then gone. And I decided whether to ask.